What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim, and we are here to talk Nebraska football, what it was like for them in 2024. Make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, especially. Check out the memberships. But without further ado, my good friend TJ Burkle from the Common Fan Podcast. TJ, how you doing, man?
Good, Zach. How are you, man? Nice to be back with you. It just, like everyone else, I'm just lost in the wilderness. It's been a couple months since college football. We got 6 more months to go. It's just kind of that you're floating around trying to find, purpose and meaning in life until college football starts.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think Nebraska fans always know what their purpose in life is, and which is why I'm excited to have you on, because I know there is always a hunger to talk Nebraska football.
You've got that right, which is why I was going into our podcast. We started about 1.5 years ago, and I had a hunch it might do okay simply because I know about 1,000 people like myself who are thinking about Nebraska football, 365 days a year. And so, yeah, you're exactly right on that. If I could do one shameless plug, Zach, speaking of that,
please do.
We are, as of this recording, I don't know when you're going to put this out, but as of this recording, we are 15 YouTube subscribers away from 1,000. So if there are any Big Ten Huddle fans out there, even if you're not a Nebraska fan, we are Nebraska nice. There's no expectation to watch or listen, but if you could subscribe on YouTube, we are almost there to 1,000. We'd greatly appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. Just search Common Fan Podcast on YouTube. It'll pop right up. So please subscribe on YouTube, and thank you very much. And subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle as well if you haven't already.
Absolutely. Yes. And just so you guys know, hitting 1,000, our listenership, you guys who have been with us from the beginning, how important 1,000 is. But just in case you're not familiar, 1,000 is when you get a lot more features and a lot more ability to create on YouTube. And so let's do the Common Fan guys a solid and subscribe. Let's get them over 1,000. And especially
Thank
because
you, my friend.
Absolutely. Yeah. Your podcast is worth listening to, and you guys know your stuff about Nebraska, and you're very fun. So, and which is why we love having you on the show.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just say this, but you're very kind, and thank you for all the very kind words. You're the best. Thank you, Zach.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to get right to it, because I feel like Nebraska, it was kind of a weird season, because I think there, like the past several years, there's been a lot of hype. And I think especially in the beginning of the year, felt like the hype was justified. And then you had that little lull. You had a 4-game losing streak, starting with that blowout against Indiana. But then you kind of recover, go to a bowl game. I think I'm just going to get into it. Was this season a success for Matt Rule?
So I love the question, and it's like we could spend the entire episode on this question, Zach. And Zach, for the listeners, Zach shared a handful of questions with me before in advance. And so over lunch today, I went through them with my boys who are 10 and 7. So shout out to the Burkle boys. And it was funny for this one of them said yes, because they got to a bowl game. And the other one said no, because they started so good and then kind of sputtered at the end. He didn't say it like that. And I feel like this season is like a microcosm of the last 10 years of Nebraska football, right? Of like the preseason hype, as you alluded to, the promise, the hope and the promise, and the 5-1 start. That actually wasn't that common in the last 10 years, if I'm being honest, but the 5-1 start, and then the 4 losses in a row, and playing Ohio State so well, but still, and having the ball with a chance to win at the end and losing, and playing USC really tough and still losing. So we still had, like, we got over the hump and won a couple of 1-score games, but we still had, I think it was 4 or 5 1-score losses, right? Thoroughly dominating Iowa in literally every statistical category and by the eye test, and somehow just giving that game away. I mean, there are so many things that are like, there are so many things you can point to as signs of progress and reasons why it might be a success. And there's so many of the same old bugaboos that are so frustrating to Husker fans. And like, you could look at a 4-point loss to the eventual national champion and say they're not that far off, or you 56-7 loss to Indiana, which, while they were a playoff team, I think Husker fans would argue we should have played them better than that. It's just sort of like typical Nebraska football. I think, to answer your question directly, I'll say yes, it was a success because they had not been to a bowl game since 2016, and they got to a bowl game and they won the bowl game. So 7-6 is not any Husker fan's definition of success ever. I don't care how bad things have been in recent years. That's not any Husker fan's definition of success. But considering where the program is, and I would also say it matters that they won the bowl game. I know it was Boston College. I know it was the Pinstripe Bowl. I'm sure nobody outside of Boston or the Husker fan base was watching, but I think even 6-7, and we're having a little bit of a different conversation. So I think it matters that they got to the bowl game. It matters that they won the bowl game, and there's some pretty good vibes around the program this offseason, which of course, I mean, we're like 10-time repeating offseason national champions. So, there's always good vibes around the program.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I didn't throw you this
that's
question.
Cool. That's cool.
But a lot of people have wondered why Kurt Cignetti was able to do what he did at Indiana in year one. Like, I think people look at Matt Rule and be like, why can't he just do that? Which my argument to that has been, you're not trying to build, like, kind of shock people with a new blue blood, like in Indiana. You're trying to rebuild a foundation of an old true blue blood.
Yep.
But that's been my thought. But I'm curious, like, how do you respond to that criticism from maybe the outside and maybe even Nebraska fans who think, why are we not like Indiana right now?
Yeah, there certainly are Husker fans who have put that out there, and I think fairly, right? But I mean, every program is different. Every situation is different. And I think you're right. The biggest thing for Nebraska football is going back to Frank Solich being fired in 2003. We're on head coach number 6, is it 5 or 6? AD number 5 or 6, and that doesn't even count like the interim guys in both of those jobs at various times after somebody got fired, right? And so your point about there's one philosophical point, one practical point. So the philosophical point is taking the approach of saying we are going to set the foundation first, and it's going to take longer. That's how Matt Rule's always done it, first of all. But it's going to take longer. It's going to be harder, but we're going to set the foundation first because we're trying to build this for the long term. And this is a place that has had a lot of success and can have success, but we have to do it in a certain way here. That's kind of the philosophical way that aligns with how Matt Rule does things. And then the practical thing too, I guess it's kind of one and the same, but when Rule showed up, it wasn't like Coach Prime basically showing up and saying, most of you guys aren't going to be here by the end of spring ball, or, he didn't say it however he said it.
Yeah.
Rule said, whoever wants to stay can stay. You want to be a part of this? We're going to build this together. Let's do it. Now, of course, over time, guys that aren't going to, see the field kind of get told that, but it was sort of, he sort of embraced the program that was and said, we're going to build with what we have and build from here. So I think it's kind of that focus on foundation, like you talked about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Obviously Dylan Raiola, a big part of this conversation, right? True freshman, 5-star quarterback, and certainly had moments, right? And certainly was helpful. They beat down Nebraska or Colorado, and now part of that, a lot of that was the defense, but Dylan Raiola had to play a part in that. Obviously got them to a bowl game, won a bowl game, but then also had moments where you're like, oh, you're a freshman.
Yep.
And so what did we learn about him this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's immensely talented, right? I mean, he ended the year with over 2,800 yards passing, 13 touchdowns, 11 picks. So you summarized it well. The ceiling, I think, is pretty high. The arm strength is unbelievable. the brain power. I mean, people talk about him having a photographic memory, sort of his, the ability to come in and start as a true freshman is pretty impressive. He's got all the tools. He's not. Coach Rule's talked about wanting him to lose a little bit of weight, be able to be more of a threat with his legs. He's not a statue back there, but he's not like a dual threat guy. So, I mean, I guess that's one thing you could maybe criticize him about. But I think what we saw was those first few games, especially the Colorado game that you mentioned, looked really great. And then you got into Big Ten play. And I mean, it's the best, it's arguably the best conference in the country. It's the best coach conference in the country. And so I think that, that started to show, and he started to, defenses started to show him things he had never seen before. And he started to make more mistakes and all of that. Right. And then, I think he was beat up at times. And then I also think we can get into this more later, but I think what they were doing from an offensive perspective wasn't working as a whole, right? Like I think, and you saw Matt Rule change out offensive coordinators with 3 games to go in the season. And so that's not all on Dylan, right? And so now we had a guest on our show who's a great writer for those Husker fans who are listening, Brandon Vogel. He's a regular guest of ours. He does the counterread, counterread.com. Sign up. It's great. Fantastic. So Brandon's a great, he explores all different things from a data perspective. And he looked at, all these five stars who got recruited and started as true freshmen. And, they were kind of different buckets, but one thing that he said was like a lot of times you see that guys, a decent percentage of them kind of are who they were in their freshman season, I think, or are who they are throughout their careers from what they showed in their freshman season. All Husker fans, of course, hope that there's kind of a leap in there for Dylan, right? So we'd like to see that interception number drop, maybe be cut in half or even more. The touchdown number maybe doubled, right? And you hope after a year of seasoning, a year on campus, a full year, full Big Ten season, all those things, and new offensive coordinator, all those things you hope. There's a hope in Husker Nation right now that the offense takes a big leap next year. Or this coming.
That makes sense. And just to point out too, I think it bears pointing out Nebraska's schedule was fairly difficult. Like you mentioned Big Ten, but no one had Illinois being a 10-win team on their bingo card at the beginning of the year. Like not even the most ardent Illinois fans. Right. And they're very confident in their guys, right? Like every time I pick against them, they'd be like, thanks for picking against us, Zach. We're going to win now. And they were really good this year. And they're going to be good again next year. And then, you guys beat Rutgers, and you got Rutgers, I think, when they were a little bit more beat up. But like Rutgers wasn't bad this year. Nope, like they were, they were a bowl team. Honestly, probably should have beat Kansas State in their bowl game.
Totally.
Indiana was a playoff team. Ohio State was a playoff team. USC, I know, was 7-6, but they beat a couple of big time teams and they could get you. They were close with Notre Dame. So, and of course Iowa, I know that was a painful loss, but like Iowa's still Iowa. Like they're still
solid.
Good.
Yeah,
they're always
good.
Team.
They're always good. Yeah.
And so I think you're a freshman getting thrown into that. I think there's hope for him. I think probably my question, I'd be curious, with the new offensive coordinator and the personnel around him, does he have enough help moving forward?
This is another one of those nuanced questions. I think so. We all think so. The Huskers have somebody ranked their transfer portal class as, I think, or maybe it was just the wide receivers as like the number 2 wide receiver transfer portal class in the country. We got a couple guys, Dane Key and Hardly Gilmore from Kentucky. We got Neziah Hunter from Cal. We got some true freshmen that we're excited about. Emmett Johnson, who really flashed at the end of the year once Dana Holgerson took over as offensive coordinator, is going to be your starting running back. we've said from the beginning on the Common Fan podcast, he's the most complete back. He's the best back. He was kind of like he'd flash and then be gone off and on all last season until Holgerson came up, and then he like blew up. So obviously the Common fans were right. So I think the hope and Heinrich Harburg, who has been a backup quarterback, but is a freak athlete. One of his parents was an Olympian. One of them was a college football player, like phenomenal athlete, is moving full-time to tight end to like dedicate, learning that position, big. And so I think he's going to actually be a great contributor there. And so, Jahori Barney's back, Carter Nelson's back. So there's a bunch of belief that we're going to have a ton of tools to help Dylan out. Again, like going back to the history of like the last 10 years of Nebraska football, I feel like we always have these guys. We just had a guest on our episode that's going to be out Monday, the first episode of March. And he made this point. He said he's one of the beat writers for Nebraska. And he was like, he's like, last offseason, I was looking through the roster and I was like, how are they going to get the ball to all these guys? And then, it ends up in the season, you feel like they don't have enough weapons. So this always happens at Nebraska where these guys come in and the fan base, like we're all nuts. So we don't help things because we assigned like all conference status to about half the roster before they've even played a down of Nebraska football. And so maybe our expectations are a little out of whack, but I think there's a hope that between Holgerson, the transfer portal class, and a handful of guys that are coming in out of high school in the recruiting class, there's a hope that the offense will take a big leap in 2025. I mean, if you look at Rule's first 2 years, he flipped the defense right away. The top 25 defense in 2023 and 2024, which all Husker fans love. And we've said so many times, the special teams and the offense have been so bad. If both of those could have been even average the last couple of years, we'd probably be looking at, eight win teams, give or take,
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, I know Rocco Spindler, there's buzz that, I don't know what the buzz is, but at least for now, Rocco Spindler is transferred in to Nebraska.
Wait, so, is there buzz that he's not going to be there? What's the buzz? I missed the buzz. What happened?
No. I think it's folks in our chat have said Rocco Spindler is still going to end up in Indiana, and I'm like, no, he's not. Like he's at least I don't think. I think we have a very dedicated Indiana Hoosier fan base. I think part of it. I liked Indiana this year, but JR is living in Indiana, and so he's like, he's a Buckeye fan, but I think he rocks the Hoosier gear almost as much as the Buckeye gear.
Well, let me get this out there in full disclosure. Then we were doing some sort of preview episode before the 2024 season, and I said that I was offended that Indiana was even trying to field a football team, and then I think I was on with you or JR. Or maybe together with you guys. And this was a separate occasion when I said Kurt Signetti was Mo Green from The Godfather.
Yes.
I knew Mo talking loud, saying stupid things. So I was way out there. I was not buying the Indiana hype. And after we got boat raced by the Hoosiers, some Indiana fan took the clip of me from our podcast of that episode and posted it on Twitter. And I was like, I kind of appreciate that. As painful as this loss was, I kind of appreciate that, and I wore it as a badge of honor. So anyway, mea culpa to all the Indiana fans. Good job. You're still one of the worst programs in college football history. Maybe after another 3 or 4 decades, you'll be up to average. Anyway, go ahead, Zach.
I was gonna say it is a badge of honor when a receipt is given back.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So we're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we will be back to talk about where does Coach Rule fit in the hierarchy of the Big Ten coaching rankings.
Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description.
Back on the Big Ten Huddle, make sure to visit Home Field. Use that code TBTH If you want some good Nebraska swag, I'm sure you can find it. There's a lot of fun stuff on that website, so make sure you go on there. But we have some important things to talk about here, TJ.
Yes.
Few weeks ago, JR and I did our Big Ten coaching rankings, and I felt great because we had the Sky U Pod guys on a couple weeks ago, and we nailed what we thought they would say. Like, we were in agreement on where we had PJ Fleck in the order of coaching rankings. I feel less confident about this one. So I'm curious, if you took all 18 coaches currently in the Big Ten, including Barry Odom, who's now at Purdue, and you ranked them, where would Matt Rule be in that pecking order?
I think this is another one I put to the Burkle boys, and I thought their answers were both pretty thoughtful. They both had him kind of middle of the pack, which I thought, that instead of just saying he's number one, like for 10 and 7-year-olds, I felt like, they were pretty thoughtful answers. I think, I didn't have the time, Zach. I wanted to actually go through and put together my own ranking when I knew you were going to ask me this question. I think it's only fair that he's probably middle of the pack right now. Right. I mean, you got, who's going to be above him, right? Ryan Day, Dan Lanning. I refuse to say Kurt Signetti. No, I mean, why am I, well, okay, let's move away from that. I'm trying to think of some of the sort of the elite tier, but even the middle of the Big Ten is massive, right?
Yeah.
Sort of the sort of, so you got, where does he belong compared to PJ? Where does he belong compared to Sharon Moore? Where does he belong compared to Shiano, right? Like all these, right. And he's only been there 2 years. So I believe quality, he's a top 6 or 8 coach in the Big Ten. Results, it's like I can't put him in the top 6 right now, right? Yeah. I'd like to believe that the next several seasons, we're gonna see the patented Matt Rule year 3 leap in 2025 and go from there, but we haven't seen that yet, Yeah. And so, he's lost to PJ once. We play them again this year. It's like, Ferentz, again, you could argue Nebraska should have won both of those games against Iowa since Rule's been there, but we didn't, and he doesn't have that track record against Iowa and against the rest of the Big Ten yet. So I think based on results, his results are average so far. And let me say on our show, Common Fan Podcast, we drink all the Rule-Aid. We love that Rule. Everybody, I think that 98% of the fan base is on board with Rule. He's got his finger. It's funny because we always look for a Nebraska connection in a lot of our hires. He didn't have a Nebraska connection coming in, but he's got his finger on the pulse of the fan base more than any coach since Tom Osborne retired. He gets the fan base. He's fully bought into the university and the state and all of those things, right? He's perfect fit for Nebraska, but we got to see it on the field, right? And I think most Husker fans, being fair, would agree with that.
Yeah, I think that's the difficult thing, because I think we know how good Matt Rule is as a coach, right? But the first 2 years in the Big Ten has not necessarily it's matched his arc, but I think it's hard to put him in. So I had this conundrum where I've Lincoln, when I was doing my list, I have Lincoln Riley above Matt Rule, which pained me because I don't like Lincoln Riley. I think he's an overrated coach, but I was like, man, I don't know how I can, Lincoln Riley beat Matt Rule this year. And so I'm like, I don't know what to do, because I actually think in the long run, Matt Rule is going to end up better than Lincoln Riley, at least in this part of his career. I think Lincoln Riley could reinvent himself and, be the top coach that everybody thinks he can be. Yeah. But I honestly think he's got to get away from USC to do it. I think he's got to, I don't think he's in a good way right now. And that's my own personal opinion. Some people would disagree with me on that, but it still is. It's maddening, because you're like, And it's not even like Matt Rule's underachieved. It's just that this has been his arc.
Right.
And so how do you place him?
Yeah, I think it's hard too. And
yeah.
I should have pulled up the list in advance. James Franklin's another. Franklin's probably in the top tier, right?
Yeah.
Bielema. I mean, Bielema's had a couple of rough years at Illinois. He's had some really good years at Illinois. Like, where do you put Bielema, right? Like, looking at all these guys. But I think it's tough with Rule too, because you talk about his arc, and we've talked about this a lot too. But the world, college football is so different than when he was at Baylor 5 years ago. And it's so different than, forget about when he was at Temple a decade ago, right? So college football is different. The Big Ten is different. So you could make an argument that he had enough talent and enough on the roster that year one should have been better. And based on the games, like, again, multiple one-score losses, you could have argued you could argue year one should have been better. You could argue that you could certainly argue that year two, special teams was arguably worse in year two. And I think most Husker fans would say that's inexcusable. How does that happen when you know it's a problem in 2023 and you don't take every possible step to fix it, right? So so there's some, and it would probably cost us at least 2 games, special teams, right? And so then you're talking, instead of 6-6, you're talking about 8-4. It's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
So all that
possibly some rivalry wins too.
Rivalry wins against Iowa. Yeah, exactly. No, special teams completely cost us the Iowa game. Missed a field goal to start the second half, and then we botched a punt that that allowed them to get points on the other end. That's the game right there. That's the game.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so all that to say, like, ultimately that comes back to the head man, right? And so if Matt Rule stays at Nebraska for 10 or 15 or 20 more years, I'm a big believer he's going to figure it out. And it's tough to predict anybody goes on an Alabama-like run or even a Nebraska 90s type run. Like, in this new world of college football, it's really hard to predict that. But I think the baseline for Rule is going to be better than, 6 wins will never be acceptable in Lincoln. In this new age of college football, maybe like 8 or 9 wins as a baseline. And then occasionally you have that special season. I'll say 8 wins as a baseline. And then every 2 or 3 years, you have that special season where you win 10, you win 11, you win even 9, and you're in conversation for the playoff and all that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what Matt Rule is capable of. I guess that's what I'm saying is we just don't have the results yet to back it up. So everyone who's watching is going to call me a delusional Husker fan.
Well, we'll get to the question that'll really, really fire people up in a minute. I think talking about Rule's prowess, I think I was impressed at least by him taking action and firing the offensive coordinator mid-season. But for you as a fan, did that give you more confidence or less confidence that obviously it seems like you think Rule's the guy, but was that a move that you're like, yeah, he knows what he's doing, like, this is good? Or was it like
100%? Yes. I'll tell you, and I'll tell you why. And the more the story came out, the more it became clear that it was the right move. But I think in most cases, you would say if a guy is in year 2 at a program and he's firing his offensive coordinator 9 games in, that's a sign of panic and desperation. But in Rule's case, it was not, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, his job was safe. Like, he's not, maybe if we had missed a bowl game again, maybe he's like a year or 2 away from the hot seat, but he still wouldn't have been on the hot seat, right? Just given how bad things have been in Lincoln for so long. 2, so he brought in Dana Holgorsen as the offensive coordinator for the last 3 games and the bowl game, and now Holgorsen's fully on staff. But it came out later that he had talked to Holgorsen in the offseason about coming in as offensive coordinator, and Holgorsen said he needed a break. Excuse me. So I think Rule knew it wasn't good enough after 2023. I think, you could argue like maybe he should have gone and found somebody else, but he gave Satterfield more of a chance in 2024. I think he knew how important it would have been really, really bad to miss a bowl game again, especially after starting 5-1. And I think he knew they had to do whatever they possibly could to get that 6th win and get to a bowl game. And I think, the real breakthrough was the win against Wisconsin, which was win number 6, first win against the Badgers in over a decade. The offense put up, 40 some points or whatever it was. Yeah. And it was like, this is what it could be. This is like, this
Yep.
is what, like, this is here. This could be the picture here. And man, that was like an emotional day, man. I'm like sitting on the couch, holding my daughter after the game's over, like welling up with tears. Like, and it's so like, 6 wins in a bowl game, but it had been so long. And, it's just like that, like, there was just this collective sigh of relief and exhale across Husker Nation, and people were celebrating. And, some other jerky Big Ten fan bases made fun of us for that. No, that's not the expectation in Lincoln. No, that's not where we think the program should be. But it was the first time in a long time we had been there. And so that moment really needed to happen for Rule. And so for that reason alone, it was the right move. And then I think you just look at Holgerson's history. I mean, he's considered one of the best offensive minds in college football. He's put up some of the, he's had some of the best individual like passing and offensive seasons in college football history. And so I think everyone is sort of expecting with a full off season. It was so funny when he first came in because he didn't know anybody's names. And so like with a full off season, when he can, instead of saying, 15 and 21 and whatever, and so he can actually say people's names.
Yeah.
I think there's a big expectation that the offense can take a big step forward in 2025. And so, sorry, get back to your point. I think there's an appreciation. One more point. There's an appreciation for Rule being willing to do whatever he perceives is necessary to get this program where he wants it to be. And for years, and I have a lot of affection for anybody who's been the head man and put themselves on the line, even the guys who got fired. But you could argue Frost was pretty stubborn. Pelini, oh my gosh, Pelini, the scheme works. We just didn't execute it. We're just like being very, very stubborn, like hiring their friends as assistants, not being willing to make changes, all those things. Frost's coach with Satterfield every step of the way, and he replaced him when he needed to. I mean, that says all I need to know, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I think,
or not, did I say Frost? Rule and Satterfield.
You said, I think you said Rule.
Okay.
Maybe you said Frost.
Yeah. Anyway, Rule.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I appreciate what you're saying too about like, this isn't like Luke Fickell, who I think he might be done after this year if he can't get it done. Like the way, because I mean, Wisconsin's been good over the past several years. And it's like, we got rid of Paul Christ for you.
Right. And we passed over Jim Leonard for you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But Matt Rule, they knew it was a big time rebuild. And if you're going to give Scott Frost, 5 years?
4 years and 3 games. Yeah.
4 years and 3 games. They gave him a 5th year. And then they gave him that with the output. They're going to give Matt Rule at least 4.
For sure.
So yeah, that's good stuff too. I'm excited for Holgerson to hunker down and be your offensive coordinator full time next year. I think that's going to be really good.
Definitely.
So this leads to, I think, my last question, and then I'll get you out of here. Where does Nebraska go from here in 2025, and why are they going to win the national championship?
Good question. I'm glad you asked. Something I think about every day. Something we've talked about many times on our program. So I mean, one of our most recent episodes was, reasons why the Huskers will take a big leap in 2025. So Matt Rule at Temple, he was 2-10 in year 1, 6-6 in year 2, 10-4 in year 3. At Baylor, he was 1-11 in year 1. And by the way, taking over both those programs when they were total dumpster fires. So that's hence why the bad first years. 1-11 in year 1, 7-6 in year 2, 11-3 in year 3. Now we've taken great pains to say just because he did it before doesn't mean it's going to happen again. And all Husker fans need to steel themselves for, it's hard to not to have PTSD as a Husker fan these days. But right. I mean, the track record, right? The fact that he went and got Holgerson, one of the top offensive minds. We went and hired Mike Eckler, Tennessee's special teams coach, to revamp the special teams unit. A lot of optimism about the personnel that's coming back. I think he definitely has upgraded the talent over, now 3 recruiting classes plus the most recent transfer portal haul. And then the last reason is the schedule. Okay. Mm-hmm. So our non-con, we got 2 cupcakes and then Cincinnati, which
it's kind of a cupcake.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to, who knows where they'll be this year, but they've kind of struggled since they switched to the Big Ten. Right. And then, we start with Michigan at home. That's certainly not a given, and I expect them to be even better this year the way they ended last season. But then we've got I think we have Michigan State at home, we have Maryland, Minnesota on the road, we have Northwestern in there. All of those games on the front end of the schedule, and then we end with a little bit of a bear. I might be getting the order wrong, but we end with some combination of USC, UCLA, Penn State, and Iowa.
You nailed it.
Did I get?
Nailed
did
it.
I?
Yeah.
So I've looked at the schedule a couple of times. I don't know. So I think that's that's how it played out in 2024 too. The more manageable, quote unquote, nothing is a gimme as a Nebraska fan in 2025, but the more manageable games were on the front end of the schedule. And so, and another point we've talked about a lot, if we're going to take the leap and be the program everybody thinks they can be, you have to win games like that Michigan game. It's not Ohio State coming to town. It's not Alabama coming to town. It will be a good Michigan team. It will be a talented Michigan team. But if we think we're one of those programs, it's time to win that game. Right.
Yep.
And so it's I think if you're a Husker fan, you're holding your breath and saying, are we the team? Is 2025 going to be the year we beat Michigan, or is it going to be the year we go on the road to Minnesota and Maryland and lose by 4 points again? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
We've been that, we've been in that realm for so long. Right. But so I think if I'm putting a positive spin on it and we're expecting the leap, right. You expect them to start 3-0. And then, ideally before that last, worst case scenario, before those last 4 games, maybe you only have 1 loss, or maybe, maybe you only have 2 losses and you're already bowl eligible and, you're still playing for a lot in late October and November. So I'm not going to sit here do I believe a playoff run is possible? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And everyone, again, I'm going to look back whenever you post this episode, I'll look back and everyone can make fun of me in the comments. But it's are the Huskers that team that are a couple of pieces and a couple of things away from beating Ohio State? Or are they that team that got boat raced by Indiana and just tripped over their appendage to give a game away against Iowa in a very important rivalry game? Will we fix all those bugaboos and those problems that have plagued the program for a decade, or will we be hovering around middle of the road once again? It's nobody really knows, and Husker fans are sort of in prove it mode. So I'm going to believe in the year 3 leap. I'm going to believe in the Matt Rule patented year 3 leap. Anywhere from 9-3 or better, I think Husker fans will be dancing in the streets, and Rule will probably get himself a nice extension. But they got to capitalize on. It's not that often that, even in the glory days, it's not that often that we get a bunch of 5 stars in Lincoln. Got to capitalize on Dylan, right?
Yeah.
We have at least 2, maybe 3 years of him left in Lincoln. Got to capitalize on Dylan being there. Got to keep the defense as good as it's been. Got to bring the offense and special teams up. Let's see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's good. And I know I think people outside of Nebraska are, they'll be like, we've heard this all the time. We've heard this. And even last year, people why are we doing this again?
Totally.
And I think, to your point, and I will keep making this point until Matt Rule proves otherwise. Matt Rule has proven himself as a good coach at at better conferences. Like Scott Frost did it at UCF, which, quite honestly, UCF's at a group of 5 school. We've seen so many group of 5 coaches do really well and then burn out at big schools. Matt Rule has had the blueprint, and until that blueprint shows otherwise, I think it's reasonable to think, I think the hype around this is real. I don't think it's just smoke and mirrors.
Yep.
And I think even we're seeing that with some of the caliber of player that they're getting in the transfer portal. I think before it was they got this guy from Alabama and Oklahoma, but he didn't produce at Alabama or
never
Oklahoma
played. Yeah, right.
Which I think we saw Florida State is they have all these transfers and they were awful. Come on.
Couldn't happen to a nicer program.
But that's not you even look at the type of player Key from Kentucky who's coming in is a really good receiver. And they got to put it together, but I agree with you that I think it's fair for them I think 9-3 or better is certainly on the table.
Yeah.
But I can understand why some people are like, hey, we need to pump the brakes. But I also see the optimism. I think both are valid responses to what is going on in Lincoln. So
yeah. And by your logic, 2025 will be very telling, right?
Yep. It's year 3.
I mean, they've got to do it now, right?
Yeah. It's put up or shut up time. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
So we talked about it at the beginning. You guys are 15 subscribers away. Tell us again, where can we find you guys?
It's just the Common Fan Podcast on YouTube. Just search Common Fan Podcast and it'll take you right there. I think you can even search Common Fan now. When we first started and we had like no following, then if you search Common Fan, then like regular ceiling fans would come up. But now on YouTube, if you search Common Fan, I think Common Fan Podcast will come up. You'll see all the Nebraska stuff. Please subscribe. Even Indiana fans, I'm just playing with you. I love you all. Please subscribe on the Common Fan Podcast. We are so close and almost to 1,000. We greatly appreciate all of you.
Yep. Go subscribe. TJ, thank you so much for being with us. Take care, and we will see you again on the next episode of the Big Ten Huddle.
Can't wait. Thank you, Zach.
Mm-hmm.